Well, why don't we get started? Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Here we are. So Liszt has retired from the concert stage and has devoted himself to composition full time. So we're really in the heart of his the beginnings of him as a composer, and not this virtuoso touring all over Europe. I will give a gold star. There were 2 factual incorrections in tonight's show. Did anybody identify either or both of them? The text goes by quickly. Well, first, I will confess, I referred to his partner as Catherine, and her name is Carolina.
No.
Signed Wittgenstein. I did it 3 times. Very bad. But the other one is that in the first piece, Obermann's Valley is from the first set of Année de Pèlerinage. Switzerland is the first set, and I referred to it as the second set. So I apologize for that. I had a feeling I was feeling a bit stressed and pumping the show out. So my apologies. But I thought I should fess up right off the bat. There were some, we obviously, Mephisto Waltz, everybody knows Mephisto Waltz. So, children know Mephisto Waltz from the cartoons, but we had a few selections tonight that are a little bit off the beaten path, that pieces that you don't normally come across, frankly, on the concert stage. And the first piece on the program, Obermann's Valley, is definitely one of them. It's toward the end. It's the most significant piece in the first set of the Année, and it comes toward the end. So this is a piece that he composed in 1842 while he was still playing, but then revised it later, which he did throughout his life. He was notorious for rewriting and rewriting his works, and he rewrote it and added it to the set of the Année. So I have a description of Obermann, of the book. It's a synopsis of the book, and it describes Obermann. He says, Obermann is a solitary, melancholy character who searches for a lonely valley in the Jura in which to live. And he says, I have been seeking through all the valleys to acquire some isolated pasturage which will yet be easily accessible, moderately clement in temperature, pleasantly situated, watered by a stream, and within sound of a torrent or the waves of a lake. An obscure valley would be for me the sole habitable earth. He is a man experiencing a dark night of the soul, and he's tired of life. So this is a man who wants to withdraw from life and go into the beauty of nature, and he becomes overwhelmed in this book by nature. This is a very, as I said in the show, a truly a story that's rooted in the Romantic period, and it's the man who struggles with reality, but then goes into nature and is just overwhelmed by the beauty that surrounds him. Does anybody know where Obermann's Valley is?
Nope.
That's good, because it doesn't exist.
Good.
It doesn't exist. If you knew where it was, we would have to check medication levels and things like that. But it's an idyllic place. It's a fictional place that Senencor had in his book. What were your thoughts about this? Did you get that? I thought, well, I shouldn't give it away, but did you hear that in the music, or what did you take from this piece? Anyone?
I think your description is pretty good, Derek. I mean,
Are you muted?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Liszt is his programmatic themes are pretty darn obvious in most of his music. He doesn't hide it under a bushel. And that one's it's pretty clear that's a nature-oriented sort of thing.
I'd say the nature aspect, yeah, there were aspects of it, but I thought that it was more sort of illusions of these things, and very, very deep founded in nature. But it was hard for me to get a sense of a man who is lost in these things. But how specific can he get? but I wasn't, I have to admit, I wasn't horribly familiar with this piece until this show. And I really enjoy it as an original composition of Liszt's. You know, I think we were getting into the transcriptions last week, and it was getting a little much with Liszt's florid interpretations of others' works. But I think here in his original compositions, I think this was a really, really successful one. I wanted to play another piece from that set, a piece that closes the first set of the Année in Switzerland. And it's called The Bells of Geneva. And in the score, he includes a passage from Lord Byron's Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, right in the score. The line is, "I live not in myself, but I become portion of that around me." So again, very atmospheric influence to this piece. So I have a YouTube performance of Alfred Brendel playing The Bells of Geneva. Here we go.
beautiful.
Sound like bells.
To watch it being played was just made all the difference.
There's a lot of Brendel on YouTube playing Liszt. I suggest that you take a dive. You know, here we've been listening to all this. I mean, tonight's program, except for the legend, it's pretty intense, dark material, I'd say. So, you know, I wanted to give this impression, this side of Liszt as well. And, you know, I think John had made a comment last week about the transcriptions. When he does, less is more with Liszt, when he's not trying to, you know, put in a million notes per bar. There's some really beautiful, beautiful things. I mean, this piece is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And he dedicated it, he had 3 children. He dedicated it to his daughter, the younger daughter, Blandine, who had just been born in the 50s, and I believe in 54. You know, and they were living in Geneva for a while, and he walked, and the church bells were around, and he took in the scene, and this is what came of it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for introducing it to us, to me.
I'm just going to reiterate that comment that you just made. I was thinking that before you said it too, that I react so much more positively to this music when it isn't buried in a torrent of notes. When it's more lyrical and more transparent, and it's really quite beautiful. A lot of the music you played this evening.
Bob, did you want to say something?
It's an off-topic question, but
Sure.
is it typical that pianists have wear Band-Aids on their tips of their fingers, or some of their fingers?
Depends on the artist.
I don't know if I've ever seen that before, but I'm not that, you know, I'm usually back away, so I don't see the hands.
They're very skillful at their use of Band-Aids when they need them. Sometimes their fingers split. Some, you know, just like with any humans, some skins are more sensitive than others. But yes, Brendel was notorious for using Band-Aids when he needed them. You know, a lot of times, and Brendel was a furious practicer, practiced for many, many, many hours a day. And his fingers took a beating, but it's happened where at the series where a nail will split and we'll have to do a repair. You know, I'll track down a Band-Aid. I have a little kit backstage, but yes, it happens. It happens. Not all of them do. It's just, yeah, it's just a matter of what condition their fingers are in. Obviously, a pianist would optimally not have anything on his or her fingers.
I would think for the touch, they wouldn't want a Band-Aid, but if they need it, they have it.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one instance of a pianist, and it's kind of gross, that split a finger while he was playing, and it got a little messy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little gross.
What was he playing?
You're muted, Will.
You know, maybe that would give it away. I don't want to give away names, but
No,
yeah, I can't.
I would suspect that this piece is as difficult to play well as some of those really dense, difficult Liszt pieces. Because Brendel, it was magic what he was doing there.
Yeah.
But not, you know, you would look at the score and say, oh, this isn't that difficult. But to play it well.
Oh, by any stretch of the imagination, this is a technically challenging piece. I mean, it's not the Dante Sonata for sure, but Brendel has a certain facility.
Yeah.
He makes it look
Looks easy.
like he's just breathing and he's you know, playing. I mean, that's Brendel.
That's practice.
It's a quiet virtuosity, and it's just like Paul Lewis, who studied with Brendel. Same thing.
Mm.
It doesn't flash. The virtuosity is not what sort of overtakes the performance. It's a
Yeah.
means to an end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gorgeous.
yeah. Any other thoughts about that piece? Well, let's move to St. Francis. Way back yonder, before my radio show even existed, I played this piece when I said, "Guess what the program is?" When
That's right.
we did a show talking about a program, and nobody got the birds. Nobody got specifically the birds, but you can tell now what he's going for. All those trills everywhere, up and down the keyboard, up and up in the high register, and just St. Francis giving his sermon to the birds. He pulled it from the Little Flowers of St. Francis, which is a book of legends, and I wanted to read a passage from that, which Liszt drew from. My little sisters, the birds, much bounded are ye unto God your Creator, and in every place ye ought to praise him, for that he hath given you liberty to fly about everywhere, and hath given and hath given you also double and triple raiment. Still more are you beholden to him for the element, the air, for he hath appointed for you. Beyond all this ye sow not, neither do ye reap, and God feedeth you and giveth you the streams and fountains for your drink. And therefore, my little sisters, beware of the sin of ingratitude, and study always to offer praises unto God. So really just about gratitude. And this speaks to Liszt's move into religiosity, which his wife, who was devoutly Roman Catholic, Carolina, influenced him. He was a Catholic his whole life, but he became more religious around this time. And in 1857, he actually joined the Order of St. Francis, the Third Order of St. Francis, which doesn't make you wear the habits or take any vows or anything, but to meet communally and discuss religion. But in the summer of 1859, before this, his 20-year-old son, tragically died. He became very, very ill, and they don't know what happened with him. And his health just, he started coughing blood and was bedridden for a few months and died at the age of 20. And then in 1862, his daughter Blandine, who he dedicated Obermann's Valley not Obermann's Valley, the Bells of St. Mary's, the Bells of Geneva to, she died suddenly after giving birth. She developed a tumor on one of her breasts, and the remedy that the doctors gave was worse than the actual problem, and she died of poisoning.
Ouch.
So
That was a slogan early on before 1900 is stay away from doctors. They cause more harm. But I have a question about the music. I thought I was hearing often not trills, but thirds or something, a larger interval than a simple trill. Was I hearing wrong?
He differentiates between what's known tremolo and a third, a tremolo like that, and also trills. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, but it was spread. It's not just the proper major second trill for sure. Yes, there are tremolos that are happening as well. But Liszt at this time, so he had two children pass away, and he went to Rome and was ordained by the Roman Catholic Church and had some very minor ordinations. And while he was there, he was referred to as Abbé Liszt. And his wife, and that was the problem, Carolina, who he had this relationship with, was trying to annul her previous marriage to the Prince Wittgenstein in Poland. So they both went to Rome, and Liszt became quite religious and was very solitary. And Carolina failed to annul her marriage. And from that point on, their romantic relationship ceased. That they continued to have a friendship throughout the rest of their lives, but it became platonic. It's very interesting. And he would go on and carried on with other affairs as he had done throughout his life. But he wanted to stay with Carolina only if he could marry her. And when he couldn't, he didn't stay with her. It's very interesting. Any further thoughts about the Sermon to the Birds? Then we go to the B minor ballade. Does anybody know the story of Lenore that I described? I didn't either, but it was quite a popular text that was translated into many, many languages. The poem was written in 1744. But I have a quote here from John George Robertson, who was a German language scholar at the turn of the century, very famous. And he refers to Lenore. He said, Lenore exerted a more widespread influence than perhaps any other short poem in the literature of the world. Like wildfire, this remarkable ballad swept across Europe, from Scotland to Poland and Russia, from Scandinavia to Italy. The eerie tramp of the ghostly horse which carries Lenore to her doom re-echoed in every literature, and to many a young sensitive soul was the revelation of a new world of poetry. No production of the German Sturm und Drang, not even Goethe's Werther, which appeared a few months later, had such far-reaching effects on other literatures as Berger's Lenore. It helped materially to call the Romantic movement in Europe to life. It's a very, very, very influential thing. And I referred to the effect of, like, it was an entry to the vampire genre, where the story is not the main character, the husband, when he comes back from the war, is not a vampire. But Bram Stoker actually included a line from Lenore verbatim, which said, "The dead travel fast," and borrowed directly from Lenore. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting. What do you think of the piece? Was anybody familiar with this ballade? No.
Pretty bombastic.
Dark, bombastic, very sort of agitated and dark and angry and, a little sinister, I'd say. And this is, Liszt drawing from another source by calling it a ballade. And what source did he get that from? What other composer?
Some guy named Chopin. Right.
Some guy named Chopin. So Chopin was the inventor of the musical ballade. So he borrows this from Chopin. And then, interesting, these character pieces, especially the ballades, when they're translated to the orchestra, which Liszt did for the very first time, does anybody know what they were called?
No.
These character pieces for orchestra? So Liszt invented the form of a symphonic poem.
With the symphonic poem, the tone,
Symphonic poem. And later popularized by which composer?
Strauss.
Richard Strauss. And he preferred to call it a tone poem. But Liszt called them symphonic poems. And can anybody tell me, besides John, his most famous symphonic poem?
Is it the one I'm thinking of?
William.
Tip of my tongue, but I can't get it. Is it the Liebestrom? Liebestrom? No.
No.
No, that's a piano piece.
Piano.
Yes. John.
I can tell you his worst one.
Which one?
The worst one was had the same name as our dog. You remember? Tasso.
Tasso.
Which is one of the worst pieces of music anyone ever wrote. Totally
That's
disgusting.
not why we named our dog that.
No, our dog was a beautiful dog, but
Edith.
Don Juan?
No, that's Strauss, Richard
Oh.
Strauss.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Liszt 2, the one very famous one is Les Préludes.
Okay.
Oh,
That's a very big one. You should know that piece, and I wanted to play it tonight, but it was way too long. So you should check that out if you don't know that piece. Wonderful, wonderful piece. And the second one was taken from one of his transcendental etudes called Mazeppa.
Oh.
Huh?
Yeah. Those are the two that are done. The others, not so much.
it's a
So
good
he
thing.
invented that art form, the symphonic poem. Liszt.
Nasty.
But interestingly enough, he used the Lenore poem again in another work for a melodrama, which is actually kind of cool. I didn't even know he had them. So it's basically a narrator with piano. And there's a recording with Fischer Dieskau of melodramas of certain composers. And I listened to some of it. It's quite interesting, actually. So it's just a narration with piano accompaniment telling the story. It's very cool.
Who else besides Liszt?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I saw the disc. I want to say Schumann. And there was a third.
Well, that makes sense.
I can't remember the third. But I'm completely unfamiliar with them. Completely. It reminds me of the Schoenberg, the Ode to Napoleon. That's similar on Lord Byron. And then finally we get to the Mephisto waltz and Manny. What do we think about Manny's performance of Mephisto?
Yes.
Great, huh?
He played it really well, and it was actually somewhat reserved for that piece. I mean, people tend to play that with a fire hose, and I thought he played it really well. It was really nice.
I agree with that. I thought there was a lot of contrast in his playing of the Mephisto, and a lot of the slower tempi he took a little bit slower, and there was in the middle section a little deliberately. I thought it was very effective and had some contrast for when it was really, going full steam ahead with the music. I wanted to read a note that Liszt includes in the score. Sorry, David, did you want to say something? Okay. Liszt included this note in the score describing the scene from Lenau's poem. I should be clear, Lenau pulled from Goethe's Faust. So the characters are still intact, but it is not direct. The program is directly not from Goethe's Faust, this scene. There is a wedding feast in progress in the village inn with music, dancing, carousing. Mephistopheles and Faust pass by, and Mephistopheles induces Faust to enter and take part in the festivities. Mephistopheles snatches the fiddle from the hands of a lethargic fiddler and draws from an indescribably seductive and intoxicating strains. The amorous Faust whirls about with a full-blooded village beauty in a wild dance. They waltz in mad abandon out of the room, into the open and away into the woods. The sounds of the fiddle grow softer and softer, and the nightingale warbles his love-laden song. So Liszt, interestingly, in the score, gives you the program verbatim. Boom, this is what's happening. So it's very cool. And like I said, he composed 3 more Mephisto waltzes. And the second one didn't happen until 20 years later, in 1881, when he was quite an older man. He passed in 86 at the age of 75, I think 75. Third waltz was completed in 1883, and the fourth waltz remained unfinished. And I thought it would be neat to play that one. It's only about 3 minutes long. Let's talk about, I want you to tell me what's different maybe in his approach and stylistically to this particular Mephisto waltz. And this is a performance with Leif Ove Ansnes, and it's one of these YouTubes where it plays the music and the score follows. So you can watch a score as the music is being played. So here we go.
So we have no idea where he intended to go with this. He just left it incomplete there, right?
Yes, he wrote it very late. He wrote it in 1885. He passed in 86. Yeah, and he just left it there. William, what can you tell me about it?
Much freer rhythmically, and also use of the left hand was much more marked than some of the others, but rhythmically very much more free and
Yeah, kind of
unconstrained.
unchained, sort of wild.
Yeah, he definitely uses in the middle hemiola, where it's like a bop 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 bop. Yeah, when it you just sort of like that, but he gets you back on track pretty quickly.
Yeah.
What year?
85.
1885. Anyone else? I would say that it's pretty sparse.
Yeah.
There's not a lot going on.
Yeah.
You know, if we look, you know, we only looked at a couple other scores, but it's just as da 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 dee da 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 ba 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 ba, and there's you know ba ba ba, and this tune going, and he spreads a lot, you know, octaves. He has octaves in the right hand and everything like that, but there's not counterpoint. There's almost zero counterpoint in this.
Straight.
It really doesn't sound much like the double.
Yeah, and it's very, like, compared to the first Mephisto waltz written, you know, 23 years earlier. The writing is so, even the segment of the piece, who knows what he would have done for the rest of it, but it seems very sparse. There's not a lot of interweaving of lines or anything like that. It's just a melody that's dotted quarter notes, very simple, with running triplet eighth notes in the accompaniment.
I had the sense that we'd call it more transparent. There's more transparency to it than
better word. Yes, better
Which
word.
is-
Transparent.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But
Derek, maybe to paraphrase myself,
yes.
and this one, less is less.
But what still remains there and is omnipresent across his compositions is what? Chromaticism.
Oh.
It's all chromatic. It's all moving in half steps, like chromatic. All of the progressions. It's just, I mean, I'm speaking harmony, but it's he's so obsessed with chromatic movements with notes. He's obsessed with it and his harmony. So quite interesting, quite interesting. I have one other thing to play. It's about 6 minutes long, but I wanted to play it. And it's another late work. It's a Sardis Macabre. And it's a Sardis, a Hungarian dance. But I want you to tell me after you listen to it what it may be foreshadowing, or whose music it may be foreshadowing. Okay, so this is a performance of the Hungarian pianist Zoltán Kocsis. Here we go.
Oh,
Back to the tour de force.
How about,
Yeah. Wow. Very
I
Liszt.
can think of many people, but how about Sergei Rachmaninoff? Perhaps. No? Oh, yeah, okay.
I wrote down Rachmaninoff too, but also out of my ignorance, but I wrote down Brahms, Dvorak, and Ravel.
I wrote Bartok and Shostakovich.
Bartok.
Ah,
I wondered about that just because of.
Bartok. So here you have not only, this is not what's known as a gypsy tune. This is Hungary. This is Hungarian folk music. And the use of the percussive side of the piano in this foreshadows Bartok. Definitely. Especially if we listened way back when at our Bartok show, the Out of Doors Suite. And it's got that very heavy percussive piano playing.
Pounding, driving
everything. And then you just have this intense Sardis. It's just going, and it's just over and over again. It's spinning, the dance is spinning, it's spinning and getting more and more complicated, obviously, with the virtuosity, but I see Bartok here. Yeah. But maybe I'm crazy.
But then, of course, having a Hungarian pianist and a Hungarian, it's all.
I stacked the deck, William. I stacked the deck.
Yeah, it's all genetics.
It's all converging on Bartok.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think it's cool. Liszt he left a lasting impression in music history. His writing, his use of harmony, and we talked about toward the end of his career, the atonality. He remains a very, very important figure in music history as a player and as a composer.
Derek, this is going to sound really crazy, but there were some aspects of that, setting aside the percussiveness, but mostly the chromaticism, that reminded me a little bit of Debussy. And I know that sounds really weird and crazy.
John, you're insane.
But there was something about it that just gave me a little bit of that feeling. I mean, take out a lot of the triple fortes.
Yeah.
Well, I heard it in the Bells of Geneva.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I heard it.
Yeah.
I maybe, John, it's speaking to the tune is circling around this very small area of pitches.
Yeah.
Right? Where it could be, maybe pentatonic and maybe close to being pentatonic. I could see, maybe you're not so crazy. But
Or maybe you are.
But I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting assessment. But you're right. The tune, for me, in that way that it's circling around a distinctive area of pitches in different registers, like and the color that creates.
Yeah.
I could be sold on that.
It's mostly the color that
I actually thought about that too.
Yeah.
Very
Any other thoughts tonight?
fascinating.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great program.
Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Next week is our last hurrah with Mr. Liszt. I cheekily said the Sigh and the Opera. It's the Sospiro, Un Sospiro etude and some opera fantasies and reminiscences. And then we're on to Chopin.
Good transition.
And you did the transcriptions last week. We weren't here, but you did last week. Yeah.
Yes, it's all on YouTube. It's all on YouTube.
Okay.
Yes, anything you miss, I post on YouTube the next day by noon.
Everything in the world is on YouTube.
Exactly. But do explore Brendel on YouTube. Brendel playing Liszt. Do it. It's great
That'd
stuff.
be worthwhile.
Good
That'd be
project.
worthwhile. Yeah. All right.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Great show,
Thanks
Derek.
again.
Thank you.
See you next
Thank
week.
you, Derek. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
So long.